Hello, beautiful, and welcome to the Moms Talk Sex podcast with me, Maura Yellington, of More Transform Into You, where I help you step out of trauma and reclaim your power. I'm so excited and honored to have with me again the beautiful Katie. Hey, Katie.
Hey, thank you for having me again. I feel so honored.
I'm excited that you're here because what we're going to talk about today, we have not had somebody really bring that into perspective when it comes to the bedroom. So, without further ado, how about you introduce yourself and
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah. If you caught an earlier episode, we did a twofer, right, with me and my friend Rebecca. I am a relationship coach and mentor, mindset coach also, and I help high achieving women who are dissatisfied in their relationships create and experience the depth in their relationships they truly desire to have. So that's the short end of what I do. I do that through helping women step into and embrace their own vulnerability. And that process looks a whole lot based off of my three pillars of work that I'll take a woman through is based off of boundaries, communication, and ultimately leading to connection.
I love that. So how did you, I know you shared with us a little bit in the past about, your story kind of, but maybe you can just touch up for
Yeah.
friends that haven't heard the episode yet.
Yeah, absolutely. Long story short, got a background in human and family development, thought I was going to be a therapist. Went to like one class in the master's program for therapy and was like, no. But I always had a passion for helping people and I just didn't even, know what it was. And this was just one of those moments where God definitely showed me my own purpose through a whole lot of trial. I had a very challenging marriage. I was always like the friend that like people came to ask for clarity in their relationships. So I could always have that outside perspective, but definitely struggled myself and to implement that for myself. And it was until, let's see, our first separation in my marriage that I discovered, oh, I have a lot to do with our problems here. And I was so grateful for it because it was like, finally, like I can do something here, right? Like I can make a change. And so through coaching and therapy of my own, not marriage therapy, which I very much heavily focused on throughout our marriage. And it was like, okay, what if I'm just in the chair with the coach, just me under the microscope, my background, my baggage, all this stuff, right? I had really never done any of that. And when I did, it was absolutely mind blowing how my relationship changed. We reunified. We had a lot of really great changes throughout that process. And I was like, dude, this is what I'm supposed to do. There's a market here, right? Like there was a change in our relationship, even though it wasn't like, because at the end of the day, I will stress this so much. It always takes two people to make a marriage work. I am since divorced, but at the end of the day, when found myself and truly understood how I was contributing to the toxic behavior between me and my spouse, and I was able to break those patterns just by honestly showing up like more of who I wanted to be. And I held my boundaries and I was able to communicate in a really respectful way. Things totally changed, like absolutely changed. And then I also felt empowered and got clarity in my marriage to be like, oh, like I am actually doing okay. This really isn't a healthy relationship. And it was unfortunate that it did end in a divorce, but I also, and I will always tell everyone this, I'm never an advocate for divorce, but I'm also never an advocate for anyone staying in a toxic or unhealthy abusive relationship. I launched my business in 2020 and I just like absolutely love supporting women in their relationships. I tell everyone who comes to work with me because I have a variety. I have women who come and they're like, I got one foot out the door, I got one foot in, I don't even know what to do, and I can just be like, look, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I can tell you by the time we're done working, you're going to know what you need to do. And so one of two things happens is they come to work with me and they find out, wow, I have a great husband. I had so much baggage of my own from, limiting beliefs that were established from my childhood. And I, reacted terribly as a result of this in conflict. Like, and now that I'm able to like identify my own needs and wants and communicate them effectively, he's stepping up. Right. Like when I've changed my approach, he steps up. And those are the marriages that just go, and usually he comes along and says, you know what, now I want my coach because I've seen you do so well. That's the stuff that we're talking about. And those are the relationships that just turn completely around. And I love that. But I also do love helping women realize that they're in toxic relationships too, because they come through a whole other process of they're really trying, they want to do better, they want their relationship to work, but then they come to the awareness through working with me of like, okay, I've truly tried everything and this is not me. And there really is nothing I can do by staying in this. So I am going to leave and I can empower them through that process.
I love that. I think that's so important. What does that look like on their end? Going through this process, what would you say?
Going through the process of working with me.
Yeah. Yeah, like what is, I mean, seriously, right?
Yeah.
Because like we come to a point where like, okay, I need help. I can't do this alone. And I think so many people are kind of scared to kind of jump the gun and choose to work with a coach, choose
Yeah.
to do the inner work. So what does that really look like from the inside?
Oh, I mean, first of all, let's just talk about how much I wish people would start working with coaches earlier, right? I am just as guilty as this, right? Like for the most part, most people have to get to a point where they are truly at their rock bottom before they will reach out and like, get some professional help. And so I'm just desperately hoping that we can all work together to change this for everyone, right? Future generations. But yeah, so usually they do come to me and they are like, I literally don't know what to do, but my relationship just is not going to work if it continues in this way. And my focus is always on them. So one of the biggest kickbacks I get is like, you're a relationship coach, but you only work with women. And I'm like, yes. And they're like, but what about him? And they always like, why me? Why do I have to do all the things? And it's like, because you're here and the work we are going to do on you is irreplaceable. It is absolutely the gold of your life, because no matter what happens to your relationship, we absolutely never have control over the outcome of our relationships. We have power and influence in them, but we cannot control the actual outcome. We cannot control that other person. So when you come to me and you work with me, we're going to go into, hey, where did that belief come from? Right. I usually start with asking them, hey, describe a conflict between you and your husband with me. And I get a really good insight into like where they're at and how they communicate. And I also get an idea of how her approach is with communication in that description. And from that point on, it's like, let's go. And I'm not a therapist, but we got to go back to childhood for a sec. We got to go there and we got to understand like, okay, where did this conflict pattern happen? Where did your beliefs around conflict establish? And what was that little girl thinking and going through during that time? And when we get that, like, oh crap, like I had a client, one of my favorite stories to tell because it's so like awesome. I had a client come to me about, look, we always fight about money. We always fight about money. And I'm like, all right, the thing is never the thing. So let's talk through this, right? Like, and she's like, yeah, I can't, like, I literally can't have this conversation, fight one more time. And I'm like, okay, let's talk about it. How do you feel about conflict? And she was like, well, like thrown off. Cause of course, like, it was like, what? I thought we were going to talk about like him. And I was like, I was like, how do you feel about conflict? She's like, I hate it. I can't stand it. I avoid it at all costs. And then when it happens, I'm just like, I freak out. Right. Like, and I'm like, okay. Tell me about a time, earliest memory that you've had as a kid around conflict. And she was like, oh, gosh, we just really didn't have conflict in the house. And I was like, meh, let's just say you did.
Yep.
Because a lack of conflict in the house is also not healthy,
Right.
because you don't get to see the resolve, right? But I said, just think, siblings, parents, just take a minute, breathe. So I kept pushing. She's like, oh, I actually did. I did experience this. My sister and I were on the stairs. My parents were fighting, and my dad walked out and never came back. And I mean, like, she's like, and then her mind was just like blown because she's like, oh my gosh, I never tied those strings together ever, like ever. And I was like, yeah, this is like, that's like one of my favorite things. Y'all, if you're not working with a coach, take everything I just said, ask yourself this and write it down in a journal, right? Like, it's one of my favorite things to take a client through because it gives you so much clarity and perspective of like where your feelings are rooted. And that little girl is going to show up in that conversation if you don't go back and actually like validate her for those feelings, right? And then we can start working on, okay, now next time this conversation happens, these are the things we're going to work on telling yourself. This is the way you're going to communicate. And we go through the more tactical, practical, applicable stuff that you're going to be putting into actual action when you go through that conversation again. And it's just pretty cool.
I love that so much. So how does that tie into, boundaries in the bedroom?
everything to do with boundaries in the bedroom. It's so funny because I like the boundaries in the bedroom, but the truth is the boundaries outside of the bedroom will create the boundaries inside the bed. Now, nothing sounds sexy about boundaries in the bedroom,
No.
right? Like not at all. And nothing sounds sexy about no, nothing sounds sexy about boundaries, period, right? Everyone's like boundaries, right? It's such a boring topic. The thing is though, is it's funny. I can work with a woman and she will tell me that they're struggling. Maybe they haven't had sex in years. Maybe it's been a while, or it's like, ugh, just for him kind of situation. And when I take her through what she needs to go through in my process to establish good, healthy boundaries in her relationship, and her communication with her spouse gets better, and she sees that he is a safe person. And when I say safe, we're talking safe emotionally and verbally, and like can hold space for her emotions, she wants him so much more. Her sex drive increases as a result of this, but it's all because we start identifying where she's been lacking boundaries in the relationship. My own personal story here is that I thought I had great boundaries. So this is where my passion comes in, because I always thought I would always tell him, like, I had no problem telling my husband, like, oh, hell no, right? You're not going to talk to me like that. I didn't have any problem saying those things, but I never did anything to change it. So even though I was mouthing off and I was verbally defending myself, and in early years, pretty toxically coming back at him, right? That was my habit. That was my toxic trait. That's not boundaries. That is toxic, unhealthy communication. And notice nothing changes from that. Guess what? Next week, you'll have that same fight. He'll treat you the same way. He'll talk to you the same way, because just because you're telling someone they need to change does not mean they actually will. And we know we cannot control them. The thing is people confuse boundaries for actually controlling somebody else. And that's not at all what it is. It looks a lot like, hey, I want to be able to be here and help you with this house project right now, but you're getting really upset and you're treating me disrespectfully. And I want to be able to help you, but I'm not going to be able to stay in this project any longer if you're going to continue to talk to me like this. So if that's going to continue, I'm going to step out. You can finish this on your own. And then we can revisit this when you've calmed down and we can be in a more respectful mutual space. That's protecting your safety. Notice I said, what I'm going to do as a result of their behavior continuing, right?
Yeah.
And so that process in and of itself, which women, one of two things, I get women who were like me and they got no problem telling him where to go if they feel disrespected. Or I get the women who are silent and they keep everything in and they don't have any voice or any defense. And either one of those is terrible ways of boundaries and creating safe space. The other side of it is he has no idea he's even stepping on your boundaries because you're not telling him, right? So there's the other side of that. And then in both cases, the woman does not feel safe in her relationship. Guys, we are biologically, physically the weaker sex, right? So if we're talking about sex between a man and a woman, it's extremely vulnerable position for a woman to be in. And the way women's minds work and the way that our hormones are all wired, I always say we're crock pots. We're not microwaves, right? We need that. That's like my favorite thing. And what Rebecca and I were working on was our workshop we did was sex starts at breakfast, because it's like all day mindset prepared to like, I want to have sex kind of mindset, right? Not like, oh, he bent over, I'm going to go, like not a lot of women have that same thing. I envy them. I envy them so much. Like if you do, that is awesome. Right. But you're part of like, maybe like 2%.
Unfortunately. Yeah.
So, but that being said, is when a woman is able to, now here's the thing with boundaries again, you can't tell them something if you're not clear about it yourself. So the most important part of all of this is getting clear about what behaviors you are not okay with. And that means you actually have to sit down and ask yourself this and take the time to answer these questions. And you have to be empowered enough to stand in your truth in that moment and just say, hey, man, this just is not okay. And you also have to have, for better lack of the word, cojones to be able to say, hey, man, I'm going to peace out and actually do it. Right. Like, and in that process, she discovers more about herself. She's able to communicate from an empowered place, not a place of disrespect. She's able to feel good about herself, and she feels safe in that relationship because now he can start honoring her boundaries. And then that translates to the bedroom.
Yeah. I love that. I think that's really powerful.
It is. It's very powerful. So, and I think too, if we want to stick specifically to, let's just bring it into the bedroom and how this applies is, for instance, my spouse used to accuse me of trying to start a fight to avoid sex. And I was actually doing the opposite. See, now this is where the lack of awareness comes in, right? At the time, I was actually fighting to have sex. See, what something was unresolved between us. I didn't feel like I could have sex until that was resolved. So I would bring it back up and I would try to resolve it in that moment. And he was like, oh my gosh, you're trying to sabotage sex. And part of it, he wasn't completely wrong, in the sense of I was not handling it correctly. But neither one of us could articulate what was happening in that cycle. And so then he would feel rejected and defensive. And I would feel like oh gosh, my emotions aren't being honored or valued. And then we would fight and argue, and then no sex would be had. Yeah. And then when I discovered my own awareness of like, oh, I don't feel like I'm in a safe space. Okay. Lady boner getting killed right now because earlier on in the day, you were a major jerk. And I never really got like true resolution or restoration from that incident. And now you just want me to turn that off and turn me on. And so what I learned to do is say, hey, I really want to have sex tonight. And so ladies, if you're listening, maybe you don't even want to have sex, but maybe you want to have sex. And maybe that's true for you. Okay. But hey, I'd really like to want to have sex tonight. Here's the thing. I need some help working through this issue that has not been resolved. can we take just about a few minutes to really hash this out and get to some resolution so that I feel like good and safe about going and being intimate with you? Does that work for you?
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, and then of course they're like, oh, all ears, right? Like you will never get your husband's attention more when you start a phrase like that, right? But notice it's not like, hey, if you want sex, you're going to have to, right? It's not a command. It's asking them if they're in the space and able to help you with this. It's very respectful. And it is just simply saying, hey, this is what I need. I also want to have sex with you, but like, this is what I need right now. Can you help me with that? Like, that is key.
Wow, that's really great. I love that. And I feel like the women listening, I think you should rewind and just write all the little tidbits that Katie is giving you, because they're gold nuggets that she's dropping here for you to be able to do this process with yourself at home or reach out to her. So, where can we find more about you and what you're
Yeah.
doing and what
Yes.
you're putting out into the world?
Yes. 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 Yeah, so you can find me. I'm on Instagram. I'm at intimacy_revolution. So that's my Instagram handle, Katie Mae. That's Katie and then MAE. And the Katie Mae Show is my podcast, so you can find me there as well. But reach out to me, however, you can hit me up in the DMs. And if you have any questions or if you need more help on this, one last piece of advice I would throw in there for just boundaries in the bedroom is make it your own personal boundary to never correct him in the middle of the throws. Cause then, yeah, that's my, it's not like if he starts doing something that's like not okay, right? Like that you can't be like, let's redirect, shall we? I really like it when you do this. Let's not do that. But that's just my one little tip is always after the fact, like, hey, you know what? I really loved it when you did XYZ. And maybe that one thing we tried, I'm not really sure I felt that, but let's go back to this, right? So keep it more on the what to do and less of what not to do, and definitely not in like the middle of the act. That's just my last piece of advice for all your listeners.
And also, right, the law of attraction, everything you're going to focus on, you're going to create. So if you're not happy with what's going on, try to focus on what you are happy with. And I think that's really key with all of this, right? Like, so
Yes.
maybe the one boundary can be like, I'm going to orgasm at least twice. That's my boundary and make it happen.
That's like a goal. That's just the goal. This is my goal. This is what I'm focusing on. and and help me get to this goal. I'm sure he would be very excited to help you with that goal. So yes, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me again. This was so much fun.
Thanks for coming. I think what you gave with us is remarkable and really shed some light. And I love how you put it in this process, because I feel it's really easy to really go through and take out, like I said, these gold nuggets and really apply them to what you're doing. And you could shift, because just as I was listening to you, I'm like, okay, this could be really good even with your child, right? With your
Oh yeah,
teenager, right? Like there's a lot
absolutely.
of that. So I feel like it could be applicable to a lot of different areas of your life, not
Yep.
just the bedroom. So
Well, and on that note, that's why I have my so I do group coaching, and my whole program is called the Game Changers. And those ladies in there, like, we talk about all of it. Like it's all applicable. How you show up in your relationships with your kids, with your spouse, with your mother-in-law, like it all says something about you. And that's the most beautiful part about relationships is that they help us grow if we use them that way, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Amen to that. And also our relationship with ourselves, right? That's where we start.
Yes.
We have to start there with
That's
us,
where we
with
start.
the little girl in there that needs the support and the help. So it's time to reconnect to these little
That's
girls and heal them, give them
absolutely.
that love that they need so they can flourish and be the woman you want to be in this world. I truly, honestly support that notion and the
Yes,
work that you
ma'am.
do. So thank you.
Thank you. It was so fun.
Okay, beautiful ladies. Thanks for tuning in this week. Tune in again next week for some more amazing sex talk.
Whoop, whoop.